صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير خلق كلهم مولاي صل وسلم دائما
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching The Right Path. I'm your host, Azha. Every Zil-Hajj we celebrate Eid al-Azha, devouring in the feast and meeting and greeting our friends and family and the close ones, oftentimes forgetting why we celebrate this day, what is the meaning behind the sacrifice. Is it just about sacrificing an animal and distributing the meat, or is there more meaning to it? That is what we will explore in our conversation with Dr. Kawal Kaisar. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Sahiba. How have you been?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah.
So, Dr. Sahiba, we use the word sacrifice so much in our conversations day to day. I think in every aspect of our life, this word is pertinent. So, in terms of Islam, what does sacrifice mean?
If we study from the Islamic perspective, the word that is used is qurbani. And qurbani is coming from the word qurb. And qurb means drawing yourself closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So basically, it's not just the ritual, it's the spirit behind the ritual that is very important. But a lot of time when people say, okay, why not just adopt a spirit and then use some other means to deliver that. But what is important for us to understand is it's the practice as well as the ideology or the spirit behind that practice. Both of them are very closely interlinked, and that is how we have been told to adopt that. So sacrifice for us believers is not just a ritual where you are cutting off an animal in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then distributing that meat to different people, but this is a means for getting closer to your God. And sometimes people say, how would we get closer by that activity? Because I have actually seen people getting horrified by the whole idea of, first of all, going to that place, the sacrificial place, and buying the animal, then bringing the animal home, and then the place gets so messy, and then ultimately you have to find a butcher, and the whole process. For some people it is, especially if you are into the animal rights things or you are a total vegetarian, so you don't like the concept of it. But when we understand how this process was initiated, how this brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what are the benefits, what are the different learning, that's when you enjoy the whole thing.
Exactly. So there's always a reason behind any thing that we have to do when it comes to the religion. That is important. Now if we talk about the ritual, how it all happened, on Eid al-Azha, Muslims are told it's a duty for them, the people who can afford it, of course, that they need to sacrifice an animal in the way of Allah. So if you can tell us the background of the story.
The background of the story is related to Ibrahim alayhi salam. And because this whole Eid and Zil-Hijjah is more about all the practices that are coming from Ibrahim alayhi salam, or many of them. So we find out that one fine morning he gets up and he goes to his son and he says, I had a dream. And we must understand that all the dreams of the prophets are the visions, something that is a commandment or a source of a revelation that is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala towards them. So in his dream, he saw that he was sacrificing his son. And we must understand that this is a son which he got in a very late age. This is a son for which he made a lot of du'as, and same son that was left in a desert in Makkah, where we find out from that story that there was a water which gushed out because of the place there where he was, that is called Zamzam. So now the son is around 7 to 8 years of age, and the father goes to the son and says, I had this vision where I am taking you to a certain spot and I'm sacrificing you. And the son says, if this is a commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's put it into practice. In fact, while they were going towards that place, and he had a knife, the father had a knife with him and he had a rope with him, and he said, why don't you blindfold yourself before you sacrifice me, in case you have this feeling in your heart that, out of love you don't want to, or you for a minute or a second have second thoughts. look at the vision of the father and the connection of father and son. And also, like when we read about Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was visionary, he submitted, he was focused. We find similar traits in Ismail alayhi salam, who was his son, that he never backed off. He was like, if this is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's just get going and do it. So while they were on their way, it was not an easy decision for them to take. And even we find out at that moment that Shaitan, he came up and he first went to Ibrahim alayhi salam and he said, why do you want to do it? Why do you even want to think about it? Look, this is your son and you can't do that. Allah can't put you through such a big test and you should question it. But Ibrahim alayhi salam actually threw a stone at him and said, get away, and I'm going to follow the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then the shaitan, the devil, went to his wife Hajra alayhi salam and said, look what your husband is doing to your son. She again said, this is a commandment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we are not going to listen to you. Then he went to the son and he said, what could your parents be doing to you? So there's a lot of learning in that, the father-son relationship, the focus of father going down to his kids, then the husband-wife bonding that we find out, and ultimately they wanted to just get done with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted. And while he was there, he was about to sacrifice his son, Allah had not actually planned it to happen that way, and there was a ram which came from up the heavens and it was replaced by his son. So this is something that we celebrate every year, so that there is a reminder for us about how we maintain our relationship, keeping in focus that we are first subservient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, we also remember that there are a lot of places in our life where we are asked to make a choice which is not according to as we desire or we want to do, or apparently we feel that there is some loss in this for us from the worldly perspective. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want us to have all the loss. He wants to just test us that how firm we are in our belief. So sacrifice, when we make from that perspective, that is when we come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine how much you strengthen your faith when you feel, yes, I'm ready to do anything for God.
Exactly, ready to even sacrifice this temptation that is there in front of us, the things that are near and dear to us. That sense of sacrifice is provoked, I think, by this story and this Eid al-Azha as well.
Plus we find out that in life, a lot of time when people say, I want to be true in my religious practices, and I want to be true to God, but we have to survive in society. So my son needs this, and my daughter wants to do this, and my family members, they are asking me to opt for this option. So I feel helpless. So this story tells us that no. For us, the most important thing is, first of all, we have to set a certain criterion standard for ourselves, and the benchmark tells us, first, be honest in your relationship with God. So once you are honest over there, once you are doing that practice, then rest of the things are going to automatically fall into their right perspectives. You will be able to withstand a lot of pressures and be in right places.
And be surrounded by people who are accepting of you.
Yes.
So you don't have to pretend to be someone else in order to be in their good books or in order to seek validation from them. I think that is very important to realize from this event that we take away, because of course it's like you sacrifice an animal and you distribute the meat. That is the whole essence, that is the practical aspect of it.
Exactly.
But the spiritual aspect of it, understanding it, is very important. So now if we talk about the dates on which Eid al-Azha is celebrated, if you can highlight it as well, that throughout the start of this month till Eid al-Azha, if you can tell us the timeline.
Basically, if you look at the timeline, the moment the Zil-Hijjah starts, if you have to make a sacrifice, then one advice that we get from the Prophet is that do not cut your nails and hair.
All right.
And first you focus on your sacrifice and all rest of the good deeds that you're going to practice. And if you're going for Hajj, and obviously the rituals of Hajj, and then we understand that the exact timings when to perform that sacrifice between those rituals. But if you're at home and you are just benefiting from all the good deeds of the Zil-Hijjah, so on we find out that on that Eid day, what we do is first we go for Eid prayers, then we come back, and the first thing that we do is sacrifice the animal. Because in the times of the Prophet ﷺ, some people came and they told the Prophet that there was a person who had sacrificed before performing that Eid prayer. So the Prophet ﷺ said that that will be considered just any sacrifice, not that specific sacrifice that you make on Eid day. Another important thing is that, yes, according to the fiqh that we study by the scholar, they say someone who is eligible for giving zakat is one who would make that sacrifice. But we also find out that in the times of the Prophet ﷺ, many people did make that sacrifice when they couldn't afford much, but they wanted to feel that closeness. They wanted this as a reminder for themselves that can I sacrifice something, or this sacrifice of an animal is letting me remember for the whole next year that every day what are the sacrifices I'm making in my life for that higher status in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people have still made sacrifice. So when people ask me that how much money should I have to like be eligible for making this sacrifice, I say the thing that you need to have is love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So some people I know, I even know some students who keep saving whole year, and they say that we want to like save out of our pocket money and we want to make sacrifice. But yes, from the perspective of the fiqh, we do understand that if one sacrifice for someone who can manage it is made, it is good for the whole family.
That is beautiful. And there's this one thing that I constantly read about during last year. It was that because it's COVID time, people are going through a lot, livelihoods were lost. So this is a little contemporary question that I wanted to ask you, was that a lot of people were suggesting that they should skip on the sacrifice and they should help the people by giving them monetary assistance or something like that. So I think that is something that we need to address.
Yes,
and
this is a very, very important question, Rida, and it's not just related to COVID. In all these times, every year I hear this debate in a certain group or a certain place among youngsters, or sometimes even very learned people, when they say, oh, why do we have to sacrifice so many animals, and why can't we opt for just giving away that money and helping the poor and needy one? For me, what important thing is that we have to look into the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because in many situations he did opt for not this thing or that thing, or he gave options. But when every Eid, I mean, there were very difficult times for the believers, but every Eid, every year, he made that sacrifice. And when he was performing Hajj, that was the first and the last one that he made, that he performed, and he sacrificed 100 animals on that spot. I mean, he could have just sacrificed one animal, and he could have said that the rest of the money that I want to sacrifice, want to give out, could be given to the needy people. So sacrifice in itself is very, very important, and it has been highlighted, and there is no exchange for anything else. Now, let me explain it in a logical manner as well. Why the sacrifice is important? For one thing, we need to understand that certain rituals don't have any option. That, okay, if not this, then you can do that. Second important thing is that when people say that let's give out that money to poor, what about cutting out our expenses, like when we are traveling abroad? There's so many people who would go abroad and visit so many places. Why not cut out those expenses? Okay, then...
Or wear expensive clothes, or buy expensive food.
And let's look at all the rituals that we have for our marriages. We have certain thematic events, and we are spending lakhs and lakhs on one single event.
Yes.
Then you have Mayo, and then you have Mehndi. Why not cut out Mayo, Mehndi, and such other events and spend that money for the poor? Yes. Why not have a very simple wedding? I have actually come across people who were supposed to get married, and then COVID hit us, and they, rather than saying, Alhamdulillah, this is an opportunity for us to have a very simple marriage, just an immediate family, and then we get done with. No, they postponed their marriage, and still yet they are waiting after the vaccination and everything for the herd immunity, and then, you know, everything to settle down, because they want to have a lavish wedding. So no one goes up to them and says, why don't you skip that, and why don't you help the needy people? But every time we think about this sacrifice. Then I had this doctor friend couple of years back, what she did was she gathered about 100 ladies in her community. This was in Islamabad, and she gave them a small survey form. And what she did was she asked them that if you are given an option, like if you're given an option, how many times a year you get this opportunity to eat meat. And most of them said that the only time that we get to eat meat is when the house where we're working, they give out some food to us, and that's the meat in there. Or some wedding or some festive occasion that we attend, that's the time then we get to eat meat. Then she asked them that if on Eid, we give you that meat, what do you do with that? They say that we save it, we freeze it, and we keep eating it over due time. And that's the time that we eat meat in abundance. Okay, third question that she asked them was, if you were given an option to we give you some money rather than giving you meat, what would you do with that? And she gave them a list on the priority, and they said, we'll fix our house, we'll give away the loan that we have to pay, then we'll buy a lot of dals and pulses and vegetables, and the meat was way down on the list. And do you know that we get some micronutrients and some vitamins which we only get from meat? And do you know that if once a year we get to eat meat in a certain quantity, that amount of those vitamins and micronutrients will be sufficient for us to last us for 6 to 8 or 9 months. So subhanallah, you can see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sort of made it compulsory, because if we give them money, they would not be taking care of their micronutrients and the vitamins that they're going to, essential vitamins that they're going to get from meat. Rather, they would spend that money on other needs. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sort of forced us that eat meat on that time and distribute meat on that time, and we have been allowed to save that meat. Like, you know, we have freezers now, and we have other ways of saving that meat. So let's not touch on this ritual and try to modify it. Let's not exhaust ourselves in a wrong direction. Rather, enjoy that sacrifice, feel that spirit, and share that meat with the people. There's so many, I would say, people that we say, I mean, they apparently look like doing well, but they're not able to afford much themselves, and they're not even beggars. They wouldn't be ringing your bells and asking for that meat. Look around for those people in the community, and give them that meat, and, you know, help people have that, process that meat. We find out, like this Saudi Arabia and some other countries, what they do, especially in Saudi Arabia at the time of Hajj, all the animals that are sacrificed, they actually process that meat and they send it to different places all over the world where Muslims are suffering or Muslims are not able to have access to meat. So these are the things that needs to be highlighted, that how that meat can be distributed to those poor localities.
That is beautiful, and I think the way you explained it all makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That even if you have that sense of helping someone out, you should do it by cutting something off of your own luxurious life, not replace it with a ritual that is being ordered by by God and was followed by the Holy Prophet as well. That is very important. Now, if we talk about what animals can be sacrificed during this time, according to the Quran and Sunnah, and who deserves, in which category should we divide the meat, and who is the one who are deserving of it?
So basically, we can sacrifice one goat or a ram or sheep, and this is on behalf of one person. So, and then if we are sacrificing a cow, this can be shared by 7 people. And if there is a sacrifice of camel, that can be shared by 10 people. And when it comes to sharing, we have been told by the Prophet that we can divide the meat into 3 parts. And we can have our own, like a share for ourselves, then our close acquaintances or family members or whomsoever, and then the needy and poor people. So, I mean, if you're saving some meat for yourself, you shouldn't feel embarrassed about it, or you don't have to hide it, because that's what the Prophet did as well. In fact, he used to, on this Eid, Eid al-Adha, what he used to do was that he would go without, like a mini fast. He would get up in the morning, go for Eid prayers without eating anything. Then he would come back and he would open his fast after the with the sacrificial meat. And nowadays we feel, people say, ooh, there's so much smell of this meat and I don't feel like eating that meat. I myself am more of a vegetarian, but following this sunnah, I want to open my fast again with the meat that is there. So because this is very, very beautiful tradition that was set by the
Exactly.
Prophet. So enjoy meat with your family members, and you can pass out to, again, those family members who are not, who are well deserving,
Financially.
or financially they are on the lower side, and then give out to the poor people. And again, a lot of times what I've seen in the families is that they're talking about the smell and managing meat and calling the butcher, like they make it into sort of a heavy loaded task. What I have seen in my family is, when I was growing up, my mom, she used to enjoy that, or she never made it like a heavy burden on herself and other people around. So for us, it was a super excitement time that, we will have goat in the house and we'll take care of the goat, and we will enjoy the animals in the house, and we'll be spending time with them. And ultimately, with the sacrifice, we'll feel so proud of ourselves that we have sacrificed an animal for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, we revive that spirit. So this is something that needs to be practiced by mothers. This is something that needs to be taught to youngsters as well, like giving them this
Excitement.
opportunity. Let's talk about what we can sacrifice out of our desires for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let's make a plan for that.
Yes, so the act should turn into a conversation,
Yes.
and that kind of message or lesson should be instilled on the younger generation if you're like heading a household or something like that. So that is the true purpose of the sacrifice. It's not just about distributing meat or putting the meat in the refrigerator or getting ready and going on a feast or something like that.
In fact, what I've seen is, as you said, talked about distributing meat. It's like usually mom's job or some helpers at home, and they're going around and distributing the
Exactly,
meat. And
exactly.
youngsters, what they're doing is they're sleeping the whole day, and they're saying the life is so boring and Eid is so boring. So engage the youngsters, like the boys and the girls. Tell them to make a plan. They could go to some organization, charity organizations, or some slum areas, or some people, again, who are not financially very sound. And with COVID, we know so many families who are
Yes,
suffering. So we can nicely pack that meat and then pass
exactly.
it out, that meat, to those
And
families.
that would feel so good on your end as well, because when you're giving something to someone, it just makes you feel so good about yourself,
Exactly.
and it makes you humble as well. And then you're cognizant of the realities of other people as well, makes you more
Absolutely.
grateful. Now, if we talk about this thing that is very prevalent now, showing off your sacrificial animal, people decorate it as well. Okay, so that is understandable. They're just trying to get into the feel of the sacrifice. But most of the people do it as a show off. Okay, so we can afford this kind of animal, so we have a higher status financially or in the social structure. So what would you advise people who do that?
I would say that, again, the purpose of sacrifice and the spirit behind it is lacking. So when we drift away from that feel, obviously then we get into that peer pressure of trying to impress people and bring in that. So what we need to do is, we need to constantly remind ourselves and our near and dear ones about with the purpose that we are trying to seek pleasure and approval of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that by sacrificing this animal, what we are trying to do is achieve a high status in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we are developing our connection with Him, or we are trying to attain that taqwa, that Allah consciousness in our life, or we are remembering the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam, that how he submitted to Him. So again, if you have the right purpose, right intention, right vision, that's when you would be able to submit properly, and then these pressures are not important for you. What is important for you is what you can afford, what you can manage, and the best thing that you can do is sincerity. That is
Sincerity
your,
and the right
yes.
intention, that is very important. Now, if we talk about the reward in the hereafter and in this world as well, for the people who perform this ritual, who perform sacrifice, what is there in store for them?
What we find out is that when we sacrifice that animal, so this animal is going to be our ride on the bridge of Sirat, because of the sacrifice, the intention that with which we made that, and also all the hair on the body of that animal, so we get the reward equivalent to that. But again, when we are making that sacrifice, our intention is very important, our focus is very important, not just because you have made that sacrifice is going to lead you to that. So we need to remember all those opportunities in the most beautiful manner, and again, reviving that spirit. So that is important.
That is indeed very important. The right intention, the true meaning of sacrifice, understanding it. And lastly, I would just ask for your parting words about the children, how to get them excited about sacrifice and this whole day and the major takeaway.
Rita, if you ask me honestly, kids are always very excited about having the animals with
I
them.
wanted to ask you this, that were you one of those people who used to cry after the sacrifice because they got attached to the sacrifice?
We all did that. I think we all did that. That's the point I was coming to, because for kids, it's not a challenge. They in fact keep asking, when are we going to get our animals? And even if you go to all those places where you buy those animals, you would see a lot of people and kids along with them. It's the parting that is
difficult.
difficult for them. So if we tell them that, if we sort of glorify it for them, that look, you got this animal, and you then sacrifice this animal for Allah's sake, and then you distributed that meat. So what you are doing, the ritual, again, we take them back to the roots of the why we perform that ritual. Yes, kids are going to be a little upset about it, but when you keep glorifying, you keep telling them that, look, they have distributed the meat and they have done this and that. So ultimately, you enjoy the whole process.
Yes, indeed. That is a good way to bring perspective into their lives. And with that, we'll conclude today's episode. It was indeed a very interesting discussion with Dr. Kanwal Kaisar. It always is. We talked about sacrifice. We talked about how intention is very important and how this ritual is more than the physical aspect of it. There's so many spiritual aspects attached to it as well. This is your host, Rida Shah, bidding you farewell. Take care. Allah Hafiz.
بك خير خلق كلهم مولاي صل وسلم دائما